As you know, David Trimble failed in his bid to be re-elected leader of Northern Ireland's power-sharing executive, causing another crisis.
Well, I spoke last night at an event that we held in New York. It was a very successful fundraising event, and the backbone of our fundraising in New York has been the construction industry, and we donated the takings last night to the victims from within the construction industry of these atrocities. And I said, you know, there could be a crisis if David Trimble doesn't get elected, and we don't have a blueprint or a special plan for that, or there could be a crisis over some other issue next week. But what we do have is a commitment to make this work. And I think the rejectionists, the naysayers, the bigots who want the change to be minimal or no change at all, I think they had their day today. But I'm quite certain that within the next short while that Mr. Trimble will be elected. I'm quite confident that that will be the case.
When?
Well, there's a meeting on Monday, which I think will see his election. I think that some of the smaller parties are going to change their mind. I've been in touch with Belfast. I spoke to the Taoiseach. I spoke to Downing Street this evening. So I'm fairly
Downing Street
relaxed.
means the Prime Minister or someone else?
It means a senior advisor.
Yeah.
But I'm fairly satisfied that Monday will see the election of the First and Deputy First Minister.
Some will argue, as you know, they will say that the decommissioning in part came about because the leaders knew that the Republican movement was on a fast ride to nowhere as long as it was linked to terrorism. Well, as long as people thought that, and as long as terrorism stood where it stood in today's consciousness,
well,
I
would
get going.
Well, I would strongly argue against that, insofar as I have never been linked to terrorism. Kevin Barry was not a terrorist, no more than George Washington was a terrorist. And remember, he was depicted in the same way in his time. Bobby Sands wasn't a terrorist. But I actually think it's quite an academic argument, because it probably goes back nearly as far as Cain and Abel, that one man or one person's terrorist is another person's patriot. What does it really matter? What we need to do is to create a situation where conflict is brought to an end, and where no one has to be in a situation where they can either be demonized as a terrorist or, on the other hand, upheld as a patriot.
But let me stay with that definition. I mean, in a sense, but there's certain acts that, regardless of cause, might be characterized as
absolutely
terrorist.
Yeah, absolutely.
Meaning intent to inflict fear with the killing of civilians, not soldiers.
No, no. Well, I think that's what terrorism is. Terrorism is a deliberate targeting of civilians. There's no doubt about that, and that's why I spoke so strongly against what happened here, because here were people, office workers, construction workers, people on planes going about their ordinary business, of all nationalities and religions. And, you know, we have to set our faces against that, and those who are involved have to be brought to justice. There can be no equivocation about that at all.
What's the next step?
Well, I think
how long will decommissioning take, and then will that be a turning point that will...
I think the important thing that has happened, and, you know, let me appeal to Irish Republicans even here in the States, because the Irish Republican physical force...
It's never been a problem for you.
Well, but the Irish Republican physical force tradition, and this gives you some sense of the magnitude of what happened. Republicanism was founded out of the American Revolution, out of the French Revolution. So in 200 years of continuous resistance, armed resistance with the English, no physical force organization ever did what the IRA did last week. And what they should have achieved, I hope, is to take the gun out of the political process where it was being used to block progress, to put it into the decommissioning body, where that channel should be worked. And the politicians, myself, Tony Blair, David Trimble, the rest of us, then have to work at making politics work. And that's what is required. And, you know, what we want to see is, in this phase, is short of Republican objectives. It is, as I've said earlier, a level playing field. But it also opens up the possibility of movement towards Irish unity and independence.
How much money comes to the IRA from the United States, you think?
I would say very little.
Little is less than $1 million, or?
Oh, I would say it's even less than that. In fact, I don't know if the IRA have been engaged in any fundraising activities in the USA.
About Sinn Fein?
Well, we do well. We
over $1 million, less than $1 million?
Well, we can get you the figures. They're there. The Department of Justice, they're there for scrutiny. But last night's dinner, we grossed $500,000. The proceeds for that will go to the construction workers, to their victims, and two of the families graciously sent representatives there to speak in very, I think, heartbreaking tones about what they have gone through. So Irish America has been very, very good. People here have kept the faith. People here, including representatives in New York City and the governor of New York, have been champions of the move for equality in Ireland. And I do think that, you know, even for us to hold that event last night against the backdrop of this huge atrocity and these huge tragedies for the people of this city and other parts of the USA was very, very significant, because it was people making a statement of support for peace, for justice and for freedom back in Ireland.
Thank you. Great to have you here. Good pleasure to have you back. And you're on to Toronto.
We're on to Toronto. We're actually launching Friends of Sinn Fein in Toronto, so I'm looking forward to that.
Gerry Adams, back in a moment. Stay with us.